like metallic rain falling on a city of neon dreams. Our stories are both beautiful and piercingly cold to the touch. Experience the raw intensity of urban drama through a unique and cinematic lens of high-tech art. Click subscribe now and feel every drop of the narrative.
My brother was standing in the doorway of my house wearing my college sweatshirt, the gray one with the cracked University of Michigan logo, and he looked right through me like I was a stranger trying to sell something. "You should have called first," he said. I had a key in my hand. My name was on the deed. I had driven 4 hours from Chicago because my property manager called me at 11 p.m. saying there were lights on and unfamiliar cars in the driveway of a house that was supposed to be vacant. My brother stepped back and closed the door. That was a Tuesday in February. By Friday, I had learned what it felt like to be evicted from your own property by the people who taught you how to ride a bike. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work in pharmaceutical logistics, which sounds more impressive than it is. Basically, I manage contracts and compliance for a mid-sized distributor in Chicago. It pays well. It paid well enough that 3 years ago, when the Austin real estate market briefly softened, I was able to close on a 4-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood in East Austin for just under $1.1 million. I paid cash for the down payment and financed the rest. I did this alone. No co-signer. No family help. No boyfriend whose income padded the application. I mention that not to brag, but because it matters later. It matters a lot. The house was always meant to be an investment. I had a property management company handling it, renting it out on 12-month leases to young families, young professionals, people who needed a real home, not an Airbnb. The income covered the mortgage with enough left over that I'd barely thought about it. Until that Tuesday in February, I hadn't been to Austin in almost 8 months. My brother, I'll call him Derek, is 35. He's the kind of person who has always had a reason why things didn't work out. The startup he joined right before it folded. The real estate license he got right before the market turned. The restaurant concept he almost launched. He's not malicious, I used to think. He's just perpetually almost. Almost stable. Almost stable. Almost sick spell. Almost ready to figure it out. His wife, I'll call her Renee, has a different energy entirely. She's calculated in a way Derek never has been. She was the one who remembered the exact dollar amount of every gift I'd ever given. She was the one who brought up my house in every family conversation for 2 years before any of this happened. Claire's place in Austin. She'd say it like it was a shared resource, a family asset, something adjacent to all of us. I should have listened to that. My parents have been retired for 6 years. My father had a decent career in insurance. My mother taught elementary school. They're comfortable, not wealthy. They live in Columbus, Ohio, in the same house they've lived in since 1994. They are good people. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you is not the story of bad people doing evil things. It's the story of good people convincing themselves that love is a reason to take what isn't theirs. Here's what happened, as best I can reconstruct it, because I wasn't there for the beginning. In November, Derek lost his job. This was not shocking news. It was more of a punctuation mark on a long sentence. He and Renee had 2 kids under 6 and a lease that was expiring in January on an apartment in Columbus. They told my parents. My parents called me not to tell me but to feel me out. My mother asked gently whether my Austin house was sitting empty right now. I told her I had tenants through March. She said, of course, of course. That was the end of the conversation. What I didn't know was that my tenants had contacted the property management company in December requesting an early lease termination. Family circumstances, they said. They were polite, they paid the break fee, and they were gone by January 15th. The property management company sent me an email. I was in the middle of a contract audit at work, and I flagged it to read later. Later became 3 weeks. My parents knew before I did. I still don't know exactly how, whether Derek was monitoring some online listing or whether he called the property management company directly and told them he was family. What I know is that by the time my tenant's moving truck pulled out of the driveway, Derek and Renee had already booked a moving truck of their own. They moved in on January 19th. They brought my parents with them. All 6 of them. Derek, Renee, their 2 kids, my mother, my father, settled into my 4-bedroom house in Austin, Texas, like it was an inheritance they'd been waiting on. Nobody called me. I found out because my property manager called me on the evening of February 4th, a Tuesday, to tell me that a man had called their office claiming to be the homeowner's brother and asking about utility transfer procedures. The property manager, thank God, checked her files and called me instead of helping him. I called Derek immediately. He didn't answer. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, and her voice had that particular quality, careful, pre-rehearsed, that I recognized from every hard conversation we'd ever had. "We were going to tell you," she said. "Tell me what?" "Derek needed somewhere to land. The kids needed stability. It's just temporary, Claire. It's not like you were using it." I told her that wasn't the point. She told me I had always had everything so easy. I asked her what that had to do with my house. She said she'd have Derek call me. Derek did not call me. I drove to Austin Thursday night. 4 hours with the radio off because I couldn't focus on anything except the specific sensation of the floor dropping out from under me. I want to tell you I was furious. I was, underneath everything. But the primary feeling, the one I wasn't expecting, was embarrassment. Not at them, at myself. For not seeing the architecture of this before it was built. I pulled into my own driveway at 3 a.m. There were lights on. There were 2 cars I didn't recognize parked where my tenants used to park. There was a child's tricycle on the porch. I knocked on my own front door. Renee answered. She was wearing a robe, not mine, thankfully. She'd had the presence of mind to bring her own, and she looked at me with an expression that was not surprise. It was something closer to disappointment, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Claire," she said, "it's 3 in the morning. "Renee," I said, "this is my house. We can talk about this tomorrow." And she started to close the door. I put my hand on the frame. We stood there for a moment, 2 women in the middle of the night on a porch that belonged to one of us, and we both knew which one. I didn't push. I got back in my car. I sat in the driveway for 40 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel, and then I drove to a hotel. I know exactly what you're thinking, because I've thought it every day since. I should have called the police that night. I should have had them removed immediately. And here's the part I need to explain, because it matters, and because it's the part that I got most wrong. I thought that calling the police on my family would be the nuclear option. I thought it would be the thing that couldn't be undone. I thought there was still a version of this where we worked it out. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but the first one. I called my attorney Friday morning. Her name is Patricia. She handles contracts primarily, not real estate litigation, but she's sharp and she knew enough to tell me 2 things immediately. First, because Derek and family had been there more than a few days with apparent permission from someone connected to the property, the situation was complicated. Not impossible, but complicated. Texas has its own framework around unlawful detainer, and the process wasn't as simple as just walking in with a deed. Second, I needed a real estate attorney licensed in Texas, and I needed one that day. She referred me to a firm in Austin. I had a call with an attorney, I'll call him Mr. Reeves, within 2 hours. He was methodical and calm in a way that made me feel like the situation was manageable, which was either true or a billable courtesy. He explained that because my family had no formal lease, no rental agreement, no permission documented in writing, we had a solid case for unlawful detainer, essentially forcing them out through the courts. The process would take time. Weeks, possibly longer. In the meantime, he strongly advised against any self-help eviction, changing locks, cutting utilities, showing up with a moving crew, because Texas courts look dimly on landlords who try to shortcut the legal process even when they're clearly in the right. I asked him if I could just call the sheriff. He said, "Call me first." Every time. I want to pause here and tell you about my father because he's been quiet in this story and he shouldn't be. My father called me Saturday morning. He sounded tired in a way that was different from his regular tired. He said he understood why I was upset. He said he wished things had been handled differently. And then he said, "But you have to understand, Derek is really struggling." I told him I understood Derek was struggling, and those are your nieces, he said. You wouldn't want them on the street. They were not going to be on the street, I said. There are options between homelessness and taking my house. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We're family." He said it like it was an answer to something. Like the word itself resolved all contradictions. I didn't say anything back. I didn't know how to explain to my father, in a Saturday morning phone call from a hotel parking lot in Austin, that we're family was exactly the mechanism being used to take something that wasn't his to give. The legal process started that week. Mr. Reeves filed the unlawful detainer paperwork. Derek was served on a Wednesday. I know this because my mother called me Wednesday evening and her voice had changed. The carefulness was gone, replaced by something raw. "You're taking legal action against your own brother. He's living in my house without permission. He's family. Mom, he is living in my house without permission, with a moving truck. He said you always held money over everyone. That landed differently than she intended, I think. Because it wasn't anger I felt. It was something quieter. The recognition that a story had been built about me, carefully, over years, probably, in which I was the problem. I was the one who'd gotten out, the one who'd had things, the one who didn't understand struggle. And that story made what they did feel justified to them, maybe even generous in some warped way, like they were just redistributing what I had too much of. I want to tell you there was a dramatic courtroom moment. There sort of was, but it happened in a conference room, not a courtroom, and it was less dramatic than clarifying. 3 weeks after the filing, there was a mediation session. Derek came with my parents. I came with Mr. Reeves. Derek had found a local attorney, I don't know how he paid for it, who spent the first 20 minutes of the session making arguments about hardship and family circumstances and equity of outcome. Mr. Reeves listened politely. Then Mr. Reeves put a folder on the table. Inside the folder was the deed to the property in my name. Inside the folder was documentation of every mortgage payment made from my account. Inside the folder was the property management company's records showing the lease history, the tenant departure, and the records of a phone call made to their office from Derek's cell phone number 3 days before the tenants left. That last one was the one that changed the energy in the room. Derek's attorney looked at her client. Derek looked at the table. Renee, who had been sitting with her arms crossed in a way that communicated she had not yet conceded anything, uncrossed her arms. My mother, who was sitting in the corner and who I don't think fully understood the legal proceedings happening around her, looked at my father. My father looked at his hands. Mr. Reeves said calmly that we were prepared to proceed to full litigation if necessary, and that given the documentation of unauthorized occupancy and the evidence of deliberate coordination with a third-party service provider, there were grounds for additional claims beyond unlawful detainer. Derek's attorney asked for a 15-minute recess. They were out of the house in 11 days. I want to say the ending was clean. It was not. My father called me the day they left. He said they had loaded everything into a storage unit, and he and my mother were driving back to Columbus, and Derek and Renee were figuring out next steps. He didn't say he was sorry. He said, "I hope you're satisfied." And then he paused, and I could hear him breathing, and then he said, quietly, "I don't know where we go from here, Claire." I told him I didn't know either. There was a period of about 6 weeks after that where I didn't talk to anyone in my family. Not because I had cut them off, I hadn't made any dramatic declaration, but because none of them called and I wasn't ready to be the one to reach out. I spent that time doing something that turned out to be more useful than processing. I hired a property inspector. I walked through the house with a clipboard. They had been there less than 3 weeks. The damage was not catastrophic, but there was a bedroom door with a broken hinge that hadn't been reported. There was a section of hardwood floor in the kitchen that had been scraped by something heavy, a furniture leg, probably, and the scrape was deep enough to warrant refinishing. There was a hole in a closet wall, small, about the size of a fist, that had been inexpertly patched with spackle that didn't match the paint color. These were not things that happened by accident. These were things that happened when people don't treat a place as theirs, because it isn't. I documented all of it. Mr. Reeves sent a demand letter. Derek's attorney sent back a counter letter full of language about good faith occupancy and family understanding. The negotiation took another month. At the end of it, Derek agreed to pay $4,200, far less than the actual repair cost, but enough to close the file without further litigation. He paid in installments over 4 months. Every time a payment processed, I got a notification on my phone, and every time I felt something I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction, not relief. Something more like a low, steady grief. Here's what I know now that I didn't know before. The word family is not the same as the word safe. Those two things can overlap for a long time. Most of your life, maybe, without you realizing they're not identical. When they diverge, it's disorienting in a way that's almost physical, like discovering that a wall you've leaned against your whole life is a backdrop, not load-bearing. My parents believed they were helping Derek. They also believed, I think, that because I had more, my more was available to them. Not stolen, not taken. Just redistributed along bloodlines, the way water finds its level. They never thought of it as harm. That's what makes it so hard to be angry at them and so impossible to entirely let go. Derek has not apologized. I don't think he will. Renee sent me a text 8 weeks after they left that said, "I hope you know we didn't want it to go this way." I read it 4 times trying to find the apology inside it. It wasn't there. My mother calls now, about once a month. The conversations are careful and surface level, the kind of talking that circles around the thing neither of us will name. She asked me recently whether I'd thought about selling the Austin house. I told her I hadn't. I have actually. I've thought about it a lot. I haven't done it. I don't know if the house being mine still is the important part, or if the important part is that I don't let the ending of the story get written by someone else. I worked for that house. I structured my finances around it. I made sacrifices for it, and I maintained it when nobody was watching. Selling it would close the chapter. It would also feel like conceding something I've never been willing to concede, which is this, that what I have built, I built. Nobody is entitled to it. Not a stranger, not a friend, and not someone who shared a last name with me for 31 years. The house has new tenants now, a couple, both teachers, with a golden retriever named after a NASA astronaut. They pay on time. They sent me a photo of the repaired hardwood floor and said the place felt like home. I didn't expect that to be the thing that finally made me cry. But there I was, in my apartment in Chicago on a Wednesday evening, holding my phone and crying over a photo of a floor I never walk on, in a house I haven't been inside in 4 months, because something that belonged to me was being taken care of by people who respected it. Sometimes that's the whole lesson. What is the most entitled thing a family member has ever done to you? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story felt familiar in any way, you know where the subscribe button is. I'll be here. I've thought a lot about what made this possible. Not the legal mechanics, those are just paperwork. I mean the deeper thing. The thing that had to be true about me, and about my family, for this to unfold the way it did. Here's what I've landed on. Every outcome in this story was the direct consequence of a decision. Not fate. Not bad luck. Decisions. Derek decided to move his family into a house that wasn't his. My parents decided that their discomfort with his struggle outweighed my right to what I'd built. Renee decided that closing the door in my face at 3 a.m. was a reasonable position to hold, and I decided, standing on that porch with a key in my hand, to drive to a hotel instead of calling the police. Every single one of those decisions had a cost. The people who made careless ones paid more. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with, especially the part about myself, because the truth is that I enabled some of this, not by being generous. Generosity is never the problem, but by confusing family loyalty with unlimited access. By assuming that people who loved me understood, without being told, where the line was. I never drew it clearly. I let the word family do work that actual conversations should have done. And when the line got crossed, I hesitated to enforce it because I was afraid of what enforcing it would mean about us. What I know now is that clarity is not cruelty. Telling people exactly what is yours, exactly what you will and will not accept, is not a betrayal of love. It's a precondition for it. The relationships that survive honesty are the ones worth keeping. The ones that only survive silence and accommodation are held together with the wrong material. Claire didn't win because she was lucky. She won because she stopped accommodating and started documenting. She hired the right attorney. She let the process work. She resisted the pressure to collapse, and there was enormous pressure, the kind that comes dressed as guilt and love and we're family. She stayed steady anyway. That steadiness was earned, not given. It was built from the same discipline that built the down payment, that maintained the property for 3 years, that got her to 31 with a deed in her name and no cosigner. The people who tried to take what she built did not build anything. That's the part that gets lost in the emotion of these stories. It's easy to focus on the betrayal, the audacity, the locked door at 3 a.m. But underneath all of it is a simpler truth. They wanted the result without the work. They wanted the asset without the years of quiet choices that created it. And when someone tries to take a shortcut through your life, the answer isn't anger, it's evidence. It's process. It's the refusal to let someone else's narrative about who you are override the documented reality of what you've done. I don't know where my family goes from here. I'm not sure they do either. But I know this, the house has good tenants now. The floor is repaired, and what I built is still mine. That didn't happen by accident, it happened because I decided it would.